This is the Story Circle Network video conference, our second annual. And this year we're celebrating our 25th anniversary here at Story Circle Network. So we're very proud of that. Story Circle Network is a women's writing organization that encourages all women to tell their stories. And at this point, I am very, very happy to welcome Sari Fordham, who is a professor of nonfiction writing. So we're going to have an opportunity to learn a lot more about that. As she has just moved to upstate New York from California, and she is teaching at SUNY Oswego University. And she has, when she was at La Sierra University in Riverside, California, she taught writing through publication for over 10 years and had over 80 student pieces published. That's impressive. Good job. She believes in the power of each story and the magic that comes when you find the structure, the right structure for writing it. I'm excited to hear about that, Sari. I really am. And Sari wrote a memoir called Wait for God to Notice, which was published by Etruscan Press in 2021 and was a Sarton, our very own May Sarton contest 2021 finalist. So welcome, Sari, and congratulations on being a finalist. That contest has become very, very competitive. And so we're extremely pleased that you are here with us today. And your topic is Beyond Chronology, from idea to published essay. So take it away, my dear. I'm super excited. I love to write essays. So I'm just going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this warm welcome. I am thrilled to be with Story Circle. It's one of my favorite organizations.
Oh, wonderful.
And I love reading nonfiction. And I really believe that everyone has a story to share and that publication doesn't need to be as intimidating as sometimes it seems. So I'm hoping today that I'll do an in-class write, we'll analyze a story, and I'm hoping that you'll leave this hour with an idea that you're excited about and to have a clear kind of sense of what next. Publication involves two important steps, probably more, but one is to write your story, revise it and all that good, great stuff. But the other is actually to submit it. And it's that second step that can be intimidating. So we'll talk a little bit at the end of this class about how to do that. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint for us today. Here we go. All right. So this is our workshop, and I thought I'd share a little bit about me. So I grew up in Uganda and Kenya. You can see this beautiful batik behind me that came from Uganda. I shook Idi Amin's hand when I was a child. He was a notorious dictator in Uganda. But like all politicians, he wanted to kiss babies for photo shoots, and I was part of that at one point. I make amazing vegan coleslaw. I have a black belt in Taekwondo. I published my first book at 46. I am not going to ever be the hot young writer 30 under 30. I have written a baby rhino, and I can't figure out a way to write about it because it's a really kind of weird thing. I want to write about it, but I have to find the right structure to do it. It can't be about writing a baby rhino. It needs to be about something else. I love reading flash nonfiction, and I just moved to upstate and am obsessed with maple syrup. So through that list, I actually just didn't want to just throw out facts about me, but I want you to kind of pay attention to the details that probably pop out for you are the specific details, maybe baby rhino, maybe maple syrup, maybe taekwondo or coleslaw. when we think about our stories and sharing them, the things that are going to spark for readers are those specific details. So what are we going to do today? We're going to write a food memory. Here's my very quick tip on writing. Think about food. Now, you don't have to write every story about food, but if you think about it, we love reading about food, we love eating food, we love smelling food, and through food, we can often use that as a lens to really share deep memories and experiences and to catch the texture of what it means to be us, what our traditions are, what we value. And when you write about food, thinking about those concrete details, maple syrup is this like great concrete detail, or coleslaw, I didn't tell that much about it, but I used the word coleslaw. So in place of delicious meal, like describing, just even naming the food item can like bring our reader there. We're going to discover how Jin-Soo Ju creates a cohesive essay out of memory fragments. We're going to learn to make and use space breaks, and we're going to consider the submission guidelines of the Cincinnati Review and also the Gumtree and where else to submit flash nonfiction. So I wanted us to start today with an in-class write. So since everyone's on their computers, pull up a document, maybe Google Doc, Word Doc, whatever document you are. If you think better with pen and paper, go ahead and grab a pen and a paper to write. And we're going to take 5 minutes for this activity. Is everyone set with their pen and paper? All right. You're all ready? Okay, my piece doesn't want to move on. All right, here we go. So for the in-class write, I'd like you to write about a food item that symbolizes autumn for you. See how many memories you can touch on and follow your intuition as you write, even if it takes you on a digression. So the idea is, I love that in the chat about loving flash fiction. The idea is that you're not telling one story about autumn or one Thanksgiving or one Halloween. The idea is to think of bullet points. So you're not writing an essay for this in-class write. It's almost like you're writing a recipe for yourself of a story that you want to tell about autumn. So go ahead and write at the top, maybe the food item. Maybe it's pumpkin pie. Maybe it is apples. Maybe it is spaghetti, and somehow that spaghetti speaks to autumn for you. So write the name at the top of your paper, underline it, and then just dart in with as many different memories as you can touch on that connects with that food. So I'm going to be quiet for 5 minutes and let you do some writing. right. So if you're somewhere really good, kind of remind yourself where you are, finish the sentence that you're working on, and kind of jot any notes if you're like deep within a narrative. We're going to take just 30 seconds to finish up. All right, so welcome back. Another quick tip I would say is we often say we don't have time to write. I know I sometimes say that. I moved this summer, so I was certainly short on time. Or we'll say we don't have time to read actually as well. But it's really amazing if you set a timer. Sorry if you hear my dog barking. It's really amazing if you set a timer, what you can get accomplished in 5 minutes. You can like just tell yourself, I don't have a lot of time to write today, but I'm going to write 5 minutes about Uncle John and, going to the lake with his family. And so then just set a timer. And instead of starting with the chronology of the event, do something similar to what we did here and just kind of dart in and capture either the images of the lake in that 5 minutes or the moments. And so thinking about how you can use your time in that way. All right, so everyone was writing about food. And so let's swing over to the chat, and I'm gonna hope that at least 4 or 5 people will write down what food item you were writing about in your in-class write. Choke cherries, baklava, all right. Apple cider, oh, that pumpkin pie, very good. Oh, several, and you know what's so interesting about multiple people doing pumpkin pie, your memories would be so different. Zucchini, baked apples, homemade cinnamon bread, grandma's turkey. And Linda's has this really specific detail that there's turkey and then there's grandma's turkey that has that extra layer. More pumpkin pie, all right. And curry pumpkin soup. Oh, wow, that sounds so good. So if you look at the chat, you can think about like, just hearing the words makes me want to hear the story. Cinnamon apple pie. Oh, I wrote about cranberries and harvesting time. Tina, I might show up at your house. I'm so fascinated by harvesting cranberries. So you've got to write that and send it to me because I want to read that piece. Actually, I want to read all these pieces. So when we even hear food, it speaks to all these rich memories. So that is one like technique you can do is you can think of a particular food item and then you can start putting up, adding photos to something is great. So you can start putting up just memories, just very quick memories and gathering information about it without worrying about structure yet. But then eventually, as we're writing, we do have to put our memories into a structure. But I really encourage students when they start writing to not lock into a structure yet, because if we're gathering information and doing free write in a structure, it can be really hard to break away from that structure when we're later organizing our story. It can first be helpful. It's almost like when you're cooking, to use a good metaphor that fits with our theme. When you're cooking, instead of just getting each item out when you need it, you get all the items out on the counter so that you're completely ready to cook. I always want to be that organized cook. So you can do that as a writer instead of like polishing that introduction over and over and over again, and then getting to the end of the piece and cutting the introduction. You can just start in there with the images and memories and gather all that information, the collage of the essay, and then think about how does this go together. There's an essay I really love that illustrates something that you can do in putting your pieces together. It's called Have You Eaten Rice? And it's part of Cincinnati Review. They have this really lovely, let me put this in the chat So you can pull it up as well. Cincinnati Review has this really lovely section called Micro. And so they publish on their website these smaller pieces. Many of them are poems. They do flash fiction and flash nonfiction as well. And they often have the author read their piece. And so this piece, Have You Eaten Rice, is one I am just super connected with. So let's have our author here read it for us. It's a 3-minute piece. We'll read it together. And while you're listening, I'd like you to pay attention to what are the details that resonate to you.
Have you eaten rice? The first kitchen appliance I bought was an electronic rice cooker. A Coco brand, same as my mother's and probably the majority of Korean households, it is still the most expensive thing in my kitchen. While not a connoisseur, I appreciate good rice and know that it makes up for my poor cooking skills. My Coco produces luscious rice every time, even when I throw in peas, beans, barley, millet, and whatever else I fancy. It speaks to you when it starts cooking and when it's about to let out steam, and then sings a little cuckoo song when it's done. It also keeps rice warm and moist for days. Reheated rice is never the same. In Korean, cold rice is an idiom for a trivialized person or thing. Rice gets sweet if you chew it long enough. If you cry while eating it, the sweetness mixes with the briny saliva and chokes the throat. Home for lunch after botched exams in middle school, I would swallow sweet, salty, sticky rice, mulling over the mistakes made. Rice was sweet and salty the morning after the drunken night when my ex and I broke up too. I couldn't remember how and why we argued, and I was hungry. While he went out for a walk, I mixed a soft-boiled egg and a dollop of soy sauce into a bowl of rice, just the way my mom used to when I was little. The slimy yolk helped push it all down. We had broken up several times before, and I was sure this was the last time. Whenever I visit my parents, my mom packs me homemade Korean dishes to take home. When I lived alone, I owed hundreds of warm meals to my mom and my rice cooker. Now I live with my partner who loves to cook, has almost mastered Korean cooking, and sometimes dances to the cuckoo song. The last time I was home, I told my mom I didn't really need to bring food back anymore. She insisted that I take rice porridge. You can have that for breakfast instead of oatmeal. He doesn't make you breakfast, does he? It didn't matter to her that my rice cooker has a porridge function just like hers. She didn't use her machine. Instead, she stood over the stove all morning, stirring glutinous rice and fish and seaweed broth until the rice became viscous and the tiny pieces of onions, zucchinis, and carrots disintegrated into speckles. She then divided up the porridge into a dozen single-serving containers and froze it for 3 days so that it wouldn't melt during my trip back to Canada. The word for rice and meal is the same in Korean, and asking whether you've eaten is a common greeting. So have you eaten rice often means, are you doing well? On the days I ate my mom's porridge, I let her know I had indeed eaten rice.
All right, I have to say that that is one of my favorite conclusions. Those last sentences, the endings of essays, are really hard. And I wish I could say that there's a time in my life where I have mastered the conclusion, but I find I have to relearn with every single piece I write what will be a good conclusion for that piece, that story teaches me. But on this one, with the mom and the rice. All right, so I wanted you to jump into the chat. You guys are so good with the chat. And type out which details really like sparkled for you in this essay. Yeah, the vegetables in the rice pudding disintegrating. Yeah, and she names the vegetables. Eating rice the morning after the breakup, the dancing to the Coco song. I love the Coco song particularly because if you think about this essay, it's a lot of different moments with rice, and rice is one thread that's consistent, but the writer's been really specific to use the rice maker as another motif that she drops again and again. Patricia Hampel, a nonfiction, the wonderful Patricia Hampel, essayist, talks about dropping a stitch. It's a knitting term. I don't knit, so I'm just going to assume that this works for those of you who are knitters. But this idea that you drop in and you keep like putting in the detail and then moving on to something else, and then you move in again, and then you come back out and you move in again. Rosemary says that the slimy yolk pushing it down. Did you notice how many times the author used some words like slimy that we wouldn't think of with like deliciousness? She was brave enough to describe food in words that are both like sensuous and delicious, and other words that we might not come to immediately when we're thinking of food. And I thought that that contrast really added depth to this piece. And I'm reading out the chat because I'm thinking in the recording you might not have access to the chat. The owing hundreds of worn meals. I love the greeting, have you eaten rice, and what it means. And we again have that beginning and the end. I wanted us to think this piece seems super complex if to write. When I first read this piece, I just read it and enjoyed it. And then I read it again and enjoyed it again. And then I was like, okay, so I need to stop reading and enjoying this piece. And I need to start like picking apart and noticing what the author is doing, because I think the techniques our author is using are ones that we can use in our piece as well. So since everyone's so good with the chat, I'm going to take just a moment and see if you've noticed any structural techniques that Jinsu uses in her essay here. How is she, what magic is happening structurally in this narrative? You'll notice she has a lot of little memories responding with rice, right? So how does she like keep all these memories and pull them together? Let's look at this. So I'm going to go back. She contrasts her mother's abiding love with her leaving boyfriend. Yeah. So she's tracking relationships. This is so wise, Susan. Jinsu is tracking relationships through rice. So it's not just random memories that she's including with rice. If you think about it, every memory that she's using is in context. Yeah, she puts the food in context with her family. So we have rice, and then we have a memory. We have rice, and then a memory. I know that I say beyond chronology in the discussion of how to write your stories. But what's really kind of maybe ironic here is it's also a bit of chronology. I'm gonna screen share. I'm gonna stop sharing, and I'm gonna move back to my, here we go. All right, so let's look at some of the things that she's using for organizational techniques. So Jinsu uses space breaks to transition the readers. So this is like amazing. Like if you haven't discovered the magic of a space break, you've got to try it. You haven't lived until you've used a space break. Instead of having to, hold your reader's hand and take them from one experience to another, you can do space break and then jump to the next experience. What does a space break? I'm going to pull this up really quick. What does a space break look like when you're writing on a Word document? So I got this up. So it's just like it sounds. So if you're submitting something, you'd use that nice double space. And then in space break, it's just merely an extra space. So it sounds really like cool and exciting to use, but like the technique of it is really easy. You're just literally, it's exactly as it sounds, adding space instead of a verbal transition. So she's using those space breaks. She's also tying these memory fragments together, eating rice, cocoa brand, rice cooker relationships. Throughout, we have these memory fragments that are tied together based on theme. Finally, we have the memory fragments. If you look at it, they're ordered chronologically. Our minds actually move chronologically, and I think that's one of the reasons why maybe when we're writing our narratives, we want to only move in the chronological story, one story, and we tell it chronologically. But if you use fragments, you can use all these memory fragments. You could order them in a different way, but chronology is a technique that's available to you here. And so she moves from her early, like middle school breakup, and then we have her young adulthood breakup, her good relationship, and, you know, her mom is throughout, and we have the conclusion. The final thing that she does is she uses those first sentences after space breaks to locate her readers. So this is really important. I'm going to swing back to, am I giving you whiplash here as I move back and forth? We're going to switch back here. If you look at those first sentences, when you have space breaks, thinking about what your first sentence is, usually you wouldn't start in the beginning of a conversation. There's exceptions for everything, but really locating your reader very gently. Rice gets sweet if you chew it long enough. We have that declarative sentence. Whenever I visit my parents, she's locating us in a who, what, when, where, why kind of way. The last time I was home, again, the author takes that location word. And finally, that amazing final paragraph, she has, again, a declarative like sentence that she uses. So this idea of going in and writing your essays and getting lots of little memories is something that editors are very interested in. I used to be the editor of the Roadrunner Review, and I would read a lot of submissions that came in. And whenever the submissions, especially in nonfiction, were more of a collage where they pulled in lots of different memories. It was all flash fiction because our word count was 1,000 words. But when the writers who submitted pieces gathered a lot of different narratives, there was an added richness and texture and layer and meaning to their pieces. So we many times publish these beautiful essays that were telling one story. But I think as a writer, it's important to have more than one technique. And this ability to take a theme like rice and to tell many different stories, or a theme like pumpkin pie, and to kind of knock on many moments can be very powerful as a writer. So let's say you wrote a piece, you have gathered some information in this class. You sat down, you wrote it. If you were like me, you spent many hours, many days, maybe several weeks. Writing is a slow process for me. And you're finally ready to submit it. That is the step that is sometimes missing. You're thinking, well, do I want to keep working on this? Where do I submit it to? Brevity, I am assuming everybody's familiar with Brevity. Brevity is an amazing place to submit your nonfiction. But where else besides Brevity? And Cincinnati Review, the micro series, is an option for you. I'm going to send us back here to our story, and let's think about the submission. So they have your nice submission guidelines right here. Their reading week, their reading season is September, December, and May. So they accept 3 months. Probably September is not right because you really want to, before hitting send, you really want to make sure your piece is ready. December would probably be a really good submission window. But I believe that they accept micro submissions nearly year-round. So where do you submit? They use their own submission manager. They tell who they are, who they're accepting, and so on. And so micro is the piece I would like us to focus on. It's the flash feature. It's curated by their graduate student editors, which is amazing. I think it's a really fun experience to work with editors who are just getting started. They're going to give your piece so much care. You can submit up to 3 pieces in a single file. And I would actually recommend doing this. When I was an editor, I much preferred when I asked for 3 pieces. I like to get 3 pieces because then it gave me a choice if I really enjoyed it. Each piece should be a max of 500 words. So Cincinnati Review is a place where you're going to send smaller pieces than you would for Brevity, which is max 750. You may withdraw individual pieces or and you can email or use the contact form. So I would really like you to copy and, save this literary journal on your links that you save as a potential place to publish, because I think this one is really good. And I love the fact that you can submit 3 things at the same time, which is what I would recommend doing. Let's swing back to our tips on writing. I have what I hope is the best tip that I can give you today. With every writing project, remind yourself, your goal is to explore what the event means, not transcribe the encyclopedia entry of the event. So Jinsu, she told us about rice. We darted in and we got several moments of her experiences with rice, but this is not the definitive experience of her and rice. She left out way more than she included. When I was writing my memoir, I wrote about growing up in Uganda during and after the dictatorship of Idi Amin. And I had transcribed my parents' letters, and I had about 250 pages of letters. I wrote a lot of letters when we were there. Moreover, I had a list of really interesting things that happened. And I really struggled to get them all into my memoir. And then one day I realized not all those events were going to be important to the memoir. They might be an interesting event, not related to the memoir at all, because the memoir was not an encyclopedia rendering of our family's time in Uganda. I could write other stories, and that aha moment seems really obvious, but it really helped me shape, cut out a lot. I took out 100 pages. Much of it I really liked the writing of, but it didn't deal with the narrative arc. It wasn't necessary for the story I was telling. And then I was like, okay, so this is not the encyclopedia entry of my family's time in Uganda, but it is focused on my mother's experiences and her ambivalence. And so once I realized what the piece was about, I pulled it out. So for your small narratives, if you're writing about apple pie, if you're writing about pumpkin pie, you're going to have way more material than you're going to fit, especially if it's a 500-word submission. So keep that in mind. I would have written and published my book much earlier if this had kind of clicked into me sooner. So what's next for you? I'm not going to follow up with you on this, but my hope is that you write a 400 to 500 word essay focused on a food item. I'd like you to dip into 3 or 4 memories, really stretch yourself so that you're not telling one story about apple pie, but that you're dipping into two. Zoom, it's a good word for us today, but zoom in on the most vital details from each memory and allow them, go back and listen to Jinsu's piece. Notice how she does it. She only gives us a couple sentences of her breakup, but she zoomed in on the visceral moment, and that's all we needed. And allow those space breaks and themes to serve as transitions. So once you've written that piece, then you can think Cincinnati Review is one place to publish your essay, but you should never have just one place. So I'm going to say this again. You never want to have only one place that you're going to submit your piece. Many journals allow simultaneous submissions. Those are the journals you want to prioritize. Some editors will take 8 months to turn around and respond to a piece. That's not the average. Normally 3 months is more average, but it's not unprofessional for a journal to hold a piece for that long. So submitting individual is just going to drag out too long. What I like to do is I like to send, yes, someone asked if I can put up the information again. I can, I'll look for it in just a moment. I like to send out 5 submissions at the same time. And if all 5 of them get standard rejections, that means that I didn't get told to resubmit. I didn't get anything unique in the submissions. They were just standard rejections. Then before I send it out again, I revisit the piece. Was this piece really ready to send out? Do I want to revise it? If I'm getting rejections that say things like, we really like this piece, but we didn't have space for it, or send us more work, I'm like, okay, that's a tiered rejection. The piece, maybe there's something going on in the piece. It just wasn't right for that journal. By the way, journals will receive sometimes 100 submissions and they'll publish 5 of them. This is not bad news, actually. This means that when you get a rejection, you're not like, but you're like, okay, so they're only able to publish maybe 5 to 10 pieces. Those pieces need to work together. So the rejection might have nothing to do with the merits of the piece, and it might have more to do with the themes. So thinking about how you submit and when you submit again, the more you submit, the more you'll get a feel for what kind of rejections meant that you need to go back and revise the piece, and what kind of rejections. So let's say you got, you're ready to send out your piece and you're ready to send it out to 5 places. So Cincinnati Review would be one of the good pieces to send it out to. Let me get the link to Cincinnati Review's. Here we go. So copy, and let me get this in the chat. So here's a link for reviewing it, sending it to, oh, it's not sending, I'm not having it, I'm not being able to paste it into the chat. Let's try there. For whatever reason, I'm not getting the chat for Cincinnati Review. So beyond Cincinnati Review, what other places can you send it to? If you're not familiar with Brevity Magazine, you've got to be familiar with Brevity. They are amazing. Another place to send your piece is River Teeth, Beautiful Things. River Teeth specifically has a Beautiful Things section where they will email subscribers a beautiful thing in your email box once a week. great to sign up for that. And you can submit to, oh, thank you, Liz. And would you mind getting in a link for Brevity, River Teeth's Beautiful Things? I'm putting Liz on the spot here. Gum Nut Tree, and so people can have those links. For whatever reason, I'm not having a lot of luck hitting paste in the chat these days. So what I wanted to talk about, Hippocampus exclusively publishes nonfiction. They're an amazing literary journal, but a journal that not a lot of people know about is Under the Gum Tree, and they are a journal that I want you to know about. They do really cool things. So I'm going to stop sharing this one for a minute, and let's pull up Under the Gum Tree. So Under the Gum Tree is a literary journal that will go to their About section here. They publish creative nonfiction in the form of a micro magazine. So their work has been listed in Best American Essays as notables. They have you can sign up for a free digital newsletter. They do I feel like they are such a cool journal that when I mention them to people, they're like the secret amazing journal that's out there. And once you start reading it, you don't want to stop. So getting published in Under the Gum Tree, we're going to swing over to I assume we're going to swing over to the Publish Submit section. So you can do, let me pull up the About and see if I can get it in the chat here. And you can then move to, all right, so if you go to the Submit section of Under the Gum Tree, you'll see that they have a lot of different, well, just imagine that we're looking at the Submit section of Under the Gum Tree. They have a lot of different elements that you can submit to, but one of the things that's really, so there's technical issues that would explain why Under the Gum Tree isn't working. So if you go to Under the Gum Tree, they have a section, and let's go back to the literary journals, and it's called Fork and Spoon, and they're specifically asking you to submit pieces that are food focused. And that would be my final big tip for you on taking your piece from idea to publication, is looking for journals that have themes that dovetail with what you're writing, because that increases the chance that your piece gets published. Is that if your theme connects. And one writer who gets a lot of these pieces published through themes, she told me that her super secret sauce with the theme was to answer to the theme, but to answer in a way that might be less on the nose. So she would think about the theme, and then she would think about it sideways. So if the theme was mothers, maybe she wrote about her dog being a mother. And so it touched on the theme, but it went in a direction that was very different than everyone else who submitted on that theme. And so she had a lot of luck getting published with those themes. But I would say that as an editor, when I do a themed issue, I was always holding my breath, because we got fewer submissions on the themes, because usually when people go to their stories, they have the stories that they have. So I was always so excited when I got a good piece that fit the theme that we were looking at. Let's move on to questions that we have. We have enough time. Last thing, before I move on from places that we could submit, I was hoping to use the chat, and if people could put in the chat literary magazines that they think that you should be familiar with for sending out your flash nonfiction. Does anyone have a suggestion here? I'm going to put Passages North as a good one. Janine Guy has The Sun. The Sun has an amazing section called Readers Write. And Oh, that's great. So you don't have to save everything that's in the chat now. The Sun has this really cool section called Readers Write. They'll usually put their theme up 3 months in advance. And if this theme is kitchens, then you can send in your kitchen sketch, and then they have a bunch of people writing on the theme of kitchens. And Readers Write is actually my favorite part of reading the Sun. It's an amazing literary journal. So it speaks to how like vibrant it is to read a lot of small vignettes that are written by the readers. Newspages.com has calls for submissions. Yes. Creative nonfiction, Flash nonfiction also requests nonfiction from time to time. These are really good suggestions. Could I have like a showing of a hand by yes? How many of you are familiar with brevity? I didn't focus on tiny love stories. Congratulations, Linda. I love the tiny love story column in the New York Times. If you just got published net, go ahead and put the link and I'll read it later. So how many of you are familiar with brevity? I'm not seeing a lot of yeses to brevity. It's funny, I was wondering whether I would feature brevity on this assignment, and I thought that everyone would know it. So if you haven't been to brevity, you're in for an amazing treat. Brevity is, they exclusively publish nonfiction, and they just had their latest issue that was released. It's online, and brevity gets something like 10,000 new readers a month, which is pretty astonishing for, and Dinty Moore is the editor, the amazing Dinty Moore is the editor. And for you know, I feel a lot of like connection with brevity. It was the first piece I ever got published was in brevity. It kind of set me up for an unrealistic idea of publishing, because I sent off a piece to brevity. I was in grad school. Within 3 days, they accepted it. And I thought, oh, this is what publishing is like. You send something off just on a whim, and 3 days later, it gets accepted. And then, you know, things got real, and I realized later. And Story Circle has 2 blogs that accept Flash pieces. That is amazing. So, and Story Circle is just such an amazing reciprocal to Voices. So I'm going to share my screen here. Oh, I see that the Gumtree submissions is now. So they want to see real, authentic vulnerability. This is something I love about the Gumtree. They want to have pieces that provoke conversation and examine a universal truth. And their departments, I thought, was really interesting. They have fork and spoon. They even have recipes. So I would really encourage you, if you have a strong like food memory that connected, to keep in mind the fork and spoon section of under the Gumtree. And let's pull up the last piece here, which is any questions that you have. I was enjoying the way Canva was removing backgrounds yesterday. So I pulled up, you can see in the corner, I'm sitting with my mom when we first moved to Uganda. I'm actually sitting on an elephant skull. So if you look at the very bottom, like where my mom's calves are, you can see the tooth of the elephant. And here I am with my daughter opening up books. So questions that people have about publishing, about writing nonfiction, about food, about recipes. If you want any questions that you have, I would love to kind of respond to them.
Yeah, I think people were just raising their hands
for brevity.
Yeah.
That total
Sorry, I caused confusion here.
Oh, no, you can't. Oh, so Susan asked, she has a 1,700 pages of a diary from the Civil War era. The big struggle has been how to structure an edited down version. Any suggestions? Wow, that is astonishing. That is a lot. That's a lot of pages. I really think if you're planning on doing something that's 400 or 500 words, you're going to have to really think of a container that would hold details that span that amount of space. I could imagine using this as a springboard for a, if you weren't thinking a book, there's chat books in nonfiction. I don't know if you've heard of chat books. We hear them a lot in poetry, but nonfiction also has chat books. And I could imagine, instead of trying to do a flash piece with that many pages from a diary, thinking about a chat book. And you could either weave your reading of the diary in with it, using quotes. But I think that I would really look at people who have taken similar connections. Do you want to tell your own story along with the diary? How do you want to do it? But my advice would be, I couldn't even begin to imagine. I think I would describe the diary if I were doing 400 to 500 words. But if I were wanting to do something longer, but a book is overwhelming, I would really look at chat books. The decision.
I want to, Sari, can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah.
We've had a couple people request that you put back up the guidelines for the 400 to 500 word essay. So I was just hoping you could pop that back up and then go on to answering the questions.
Yeah, yeah, I can do that. Let me share the screen right now. All right, great. So, yeah, so okay, so you were thinking about a book. The decision how to pay or not pay a writer whose piece is accepted. I wish we lived in a world where writers were paid. Frankly, when I'm submitting to a literary journal, I'm thrilled if I get paid, and I generally don't expect it. This is not the amazing world to be in, though, because here we pay to submit. It's usually $3 through Submittable. And I would say 90% of the time, my literary publications don't get paid. But when I want to get paid, I do something like the Insider, they pay. I was like, wow, this is amazing. They paid $200 for a 600-word piece. So I think you have to move outside of literary journals. I will say, for the literary journals, it's an all volunteer effort. The editors usually aren't getting paid. The readers aren't getting paid. The writers aren't getting paid. So this is maybe the most unethical structure, that we're all making art together and none of us are getting paid. Or maybe it's the most amazing and beautiful thing, because we provide this art that is then given to readers and they can find it without the barrier. So readers don't have to pay either. Oh, and Tina has an option for, it's called My Own Darling, the 800 Love Letters. That might be a really good model for what to do with this Civil War diary. And people are answering the questions of the diary, that Eat, Pray, Love as a memoir, and Taste My Life Through Food. Yeah, it's amazing what you can do to create food and to have it be part of something bigger. I see we're at we're 1 minute out from the end of the piece. So I want to.
There's one other question. Can I just, Jeannie had a question right after Susan, and she wanted to know what happens if your piece is sent out to 5 publications and you receive 2 or more yeses. I thought that might be a quick one.
Oh, you celebrate, and then you decide.
Right.
Then you decide who you're going to say yes to. It's okay to say no to a literary. Usually, you pull your piece if it's been accepted and you want to publish there. You go to Submittable and you remove your submissions. It's bad form to leave them there. But if you get 2 yeses on the same day, you then decide which one you're taking, and you write a very nice letter to the editor of the other journal and say, I'm so excited you said yes, and weirdly enough, I got accepted by another journal today. I would include the information that it was today, because as an editor, it's a little annoying when people don't remove their piece for submissions and they've been accepted and it's been a month, and then you accept their piece and they're like, oh, I'm going somewhere else. So if you're accepted on the same day, you choose which one you like better. And then you let the editor of the other journal know, I got an accepted. And the other journal is, we're all nosy people, right? The other journal wants to know where it's getting published. And the editor will no doubt say, congratulations, I'm so excited for you. Because as editors, we want writers to be published. So we'll be sad that it's not in our journal, but we'll be really excited for the journal that got you. So it's not a bad thing to say, I got published, accepted today from Brevity, so I'm saying no to Cincinnati Review, but I will send you another piece soon.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, I think since we are now 1 minute over, Sari, that was wonderful. Very, very informative. I loved your the experientials part. I have my piece. I've got my notes right here. I'm all set. Thank you. And also these very good ideas on publication, where to go. I think Submittable is a place that people do need to know about, because you can go to submittable.com and they have and you can put in flash. I don't know if you put in flash essay or what, but they have different ways to do that, and it'll give you ways to narrow down how many places there are to submit to. So also duotrope.com. It costs a little bit of money, but not very much. Thank you. Very helpful. I think we have a lot of people here who write essays and creative nonfiction. And I think that your talk is right on the money for many of us. So we really, really appreciate it.